Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today I thought I would answer a question that I've had on my mind for a while. And that is, if you have two AMD graphics cards, like these two right here, these two RX 580s, which are hard to get, believe me right now, all the miners buying everything up. But if you have two AMD graphics cards and you're wanting to use them together in CrossFire, would you be better off with a B350 or X370 motherboard, or is there no difference in the performance? Because both the B350 and X370 Ryzen motherboards support CrossFire. So first, let's talk about PCI Express. Now, a lot of you enthusiasts will already know this stuff, but some newer users might not, so I'll explain it for them. So the only two versions we're going to be talking about today is 2.0 and 3.0. I'll bring up a graphic to make it easier for you guys. That's because they're the only two that are relevant to this video. So basically, 3.0 has pretty much double the throughput of 2.0. And then we have the multiplier. So that goes from ×1 all the way up to ×16. The two I've highlighted there for you are the important ones. I'll explain that more next. But a good thing to note about B350s is that you'll see some of them say PCIe 2.0 ×16, and then in brackets it might say up to ×4. Now that's confusing to a lot of people. So the ×16 there is referring to the size of the slot itself where you put the graphics card into. And then in the brackets, the ×4, that's talking about the throughput. I know that's confusing, guys, but that's just how they do it. Now let's talk about the two motherboards then that we'll be using here today. So for the X370, I'm using the Asus Crosshair 6 Hero motherboard. And if we look there, you'll see that it has two PCIe 3.0 ×16 slots. That means you'll get ×8 by ×8 when you use two cards in Crossfire or SLI, but in this case we're only talking about Crossfire. So with your two 580s, you'll get ×8 ×8. This is also through the CPU, which is much better than it going through the chipset. For the B350, we're going to be using a motherboard that a few people online were saying is one of the better ones for Crossfire in terms of the B350s, and that is the Asus Prime B350 Plus. So if we look at this one, we'll see something quite interesting. So it has your single PCIe 3.0 ×16 slot, and then it has another PCIe 2.0 ×16 slot with up to ×4 throughput. So that means when you Crossfire, like I'm doing with these two 580s, you'll get one running at ×16 and another running at ×4. Now, some people say that if you're using your two graphics cards, it'll go to ×8 ×8, and it might just be on PCIe at 2.0. And that is simply not the case. I checked this in GPU-Z, and sure enough, you'll have one card running at ×16 and the other card running at ×4. And this is also through the chipset rather than through the CPU, which also isn't ideal. So let's get to the testing then and the benchmarking. So for this, I used my Ryzen 7 1700 that was clocked at 4 GHz, some 3000 MHz DDR4 memory, and of course these 2 GB RX 580s. I tested with both boards with a single RX 580 in their top slot, the 3.0 ×16 slot, just to show you guys that they're pretty much identical there. I also tested it with a single 580 in the B350's ×4 slot, so the lower slot there, because I was interested to see what those results would be like. And then, of course, I tested with both of the cards in Crossfire. So let's jump in and look at the results. So first up was Heaven. So this is a test I've been running for quite a while now, and we see for the most part that the two 580s in the ×16 slots will get equal performance. They're within the margin of error. There's not much difference there. The single ×4 slot is a little bit lower, and then we see with the two Crossfire results that they were more or less pretty similar for the most part, but a bit of a drop off there for the B350. Moving over to 3D Mark Firestrike, of course I tested these at 1080 and 1440p, but the 1080 ones are the better ones to look at. We see quite a bit more of a drop-off there for the B350 in Crossfire. A bit of a drop-off at ×4, but not much. The big difference there is the CrossFire result. So that was quite interesting there. Of course, it gets closer with 1440p, but still quite close. Then Shadow of Mordor. So we see once again a pretty decent drop-off there for the B350 in CrossFire. The rest of the results are pretty much what we would expect, and 1440p once again brings them a bit closer, but still quite a big drop-off there for the B350. Then going over to Dirt Rally, that's a big drop there in FPS. So that's about a 20 FPS plus drop for the B350 in CrossFire over the X370. And then finally, once we go over to Rocket League, now that is, it didn't work with the B350. For some reason, Fraps just wasn't having it. I couldn't get it to work, but with the other cards, everything else went fine. And that one I just threw in there so you could see the ×4 results there. For the most part, that's that one I just threw in for a bit of fun. So what do we take from those results? So when we have both of these cards here in the B350 ×16 slot and the X370 ×16 slot, the performance is identical, more or less. When we put a single card in the ×4 slot, we'll see it drop down by a few frames in some of the tests. That's to be expected. But there was the CrossFire results. So that was the interesting one. And that's where you see them drop down quite a bit on the B350. Now you might be wondering why that is. So basically, this is because RX 580s and many AMD cards crossfire through the slot itself. You notice they don't have bridges up there like what you get on NVIDIA cards, where you have to use an SLI bridge to connect them together. They actually go through the slot. And I think that means that once you start running into bandwidth issues, we'll put it that way, once the slot is basically trying to flow, say, even 10% more data than it's capable of flowing, that's going to have a pretty massive impact then on the CrossFire performance. And that's why you're getting such a big drop down there. At least that's what I take from it. So basically, I would say if you're going to CrossFire, you can do it on a B350, but you definitely want to go towards an X370, at least in my testing. Now I'm going to tell you guys to take these results with a grain of salt, because I've only tested these two motherboards, and I will be doing further testing to see if this is something that's across all the B350 motherboards, which is what I would expect, but I haven't done that yet. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. So that's going to round out this video, but I want to leave you guys with a question. What do you make of this, really? Especially you guys who are enthusiasts out there. What do you make of this? Do you really think then it's still worth it to run a B350 motherboard if you're going to be using two AMD graphics cards in CrossFire? Because that's what I see a lot of you guys saying. Oh, if you're using two AMD graphics cards in CrossFire, you don't need an X370. You can get away with a B350. And I think my testing here today has showed that that's kind of not the case. You're still better off going for an X370. But I want to know what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was trying to answer a question that I think I hadn't really seen anybody else answer, at least so far. And it was something that was on my mind anyway. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, as I have a Ryzen Showdown coming up very soon that you guys are really going to enjoy. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.